Hello my friends, if you like my work, please remember to click thumb up, subscribe to my channel or hit the notification bell to be informed about new videos. I'd just like to say thank you to all my patrons, please join them if you can, the link is in the description below. It's July 2023 and new model from Amusing Hobby, the KF51 Panther, has just gone on sale. Of course, this is not the Panther that every modeler has in mind. At first glance it's another Leopard too, but despite the external similarities it's a new design. I wasn't planning to buy it, but the pixel camo tempted me with its colors and I thought it could be an interesting material to show on YouTube. So here it is. Of course, on the channel you will find also a full open the box, as I always do, including a model built from the kit. The descriptions I found on the internet describe this vehicle as a 3rd generation tank equipped with the latest technical solutions. I am not an expert on this subject because I only build plastic models, but it seems that the constructors have created a deadly machine, the level of technical advancement of which is so high that it's almost unimaginable for an ordinary person. Of course, you have to be aware that the manufacturer prices its product in all possible ways, but there is probably something to it because I don't think it describes elements that aren't present in this tank or don't work properly. By design, as soon as I saw the content of the box, I divided it into 2 parts. The first part is the construction of the hull and turret with all the details that there are not too many. And the second part are the tracks, which are very time consuming, especially their preparation. Each link consists of 3 parts and cutting them out of 5 frames takes a lot of time. A nice addition are the elements printed in 3D, although 3 out of 4 can be easily made as plastic parts. Only the machine gun cover is complicated enough to make sense. The rest is typical customer hunting. Photo-etched thread is a standard in current produced models, so it couldn't be missing here. There are not many elements on it, but what is there I put together quickly and without problems. The whole set is simple and easy to build. I can say that it's kind of weekend project considering the time it takes to complete it. What I liked was the good fit of the parts and pretty good details. It's definitely worth noting that the model is quite large and painting it in the suggested camo will undoubtedly make it stand out among other modern vehicles. The downside is, I don't want to look for something to necessarily say that there are some downsides. Of course, there are some little things that could have been done better, but in general I have no pretensions to anything. It's okay. This may come as a surprise to some, but I didn't make the Hero 120 loitering munition that looks so good on the box art. First of all, I didn't want to disturb the silhouette of the vehicle with an open hatch with missiles. Besides, I also left quadrotors in the box, which I didn't need either. From myself to the model I added 1 towing cable from Eureka XXL intended for Leopard, as well as a set of antennas. I used what the manufacturer suggested, but I installed 2 metal antennas with resin tips and plastic antennas that I had from other models. It looks interesting enough. Building trucks using plastic pieces like this always causes some problems. I've put together sets like this many times and always something didn't go right. As I mentioned, cutting out elements is always time consuming. Then another precious minutes to prepare them, and gluing together is also not fast. You may be wondering why I mentioned this. Here in the video it seems simple and quick, but if building this set takes almost half the time, then something is probably wrong. Of course, if I had the opportunity I would change them for 3D printed or metal ones. And here a reflection came to me that if the producer adds printed elements to the set, why can't he release a model with 3D tracks? I realize the cost, but maybe this is the direction manufacturers will follow when it becomes even cheaper. Maybe in a few years the cost of printing parts will be so low that the plastic will be replaced with resin. I don't know. As always, I start preparing for painting by disassembling the model into elements that are easier to paint separately. Exceptionally, I left the main wheels because I won't be painting them using masks. In the photos of the real vehicle I noticed that the entire wheels are painted in camo colors, so I decided to do something similar on my model, but it will be more interesting, I hope. That's why I didn't waste time removing them from the model. Generally, before I start any painting work, I would like to tell you what my plan is for the appearance of the vehicle. Camo first. What the producer offers and proposes is of course a copy of a real vehicle, but I decided that my model will look more like a vehicle already serving in regular units, which is of course still in plans at the moment. That's why I decided to change the shade of green to a more subdued color, because this bright shade looks nice on a clean vehicle at shows, but I don't like the look of the combat machine with this shade used in the field at all. Besides, tanks are usually dirty and dusty, so the subtleties of color aren't important to me in this case. Secondly, I decided to add markings that are not present in the model. Yeah, the producer didn't add any markings, which is not surprising at all, because the vehicles shown are displayed without any tactical markings. Of course, I assembled them from other sets, but more on that in a moment. As you have just seen, I glued nuts to the hull and turret to attach temporary handles, which are ordinary large screws. Simple, effective and cheap. The model is ready for cleaning. I don't know if you already know one of my favorite products, which is model degreaser. If you know it, it won't be new to you, and if you don't know it, 2 sentences about it. It's product for cleaning the surface of the model before painting. It can be used on all types of materials and removes dirt caused during the construction of the model. Its great advantage is the drying time, which can be counted in seconds, after which the model is ready for painting. The fastest and the most effective way to wipe the model is with a white brush, exactly as you can see here. The first layer was black primer from AK Interactive. In this way it prepares the surface for applying subsequent layers of paint. I start with a mix of NATO black, British blue black and satin varnish. This way I create my own shade of dark grey for the first pixels. After mixing with thinner and throwing in a steel shaker, I have a ready-made paint that I apply to the entire model. If you are wondering why the whole model and not only the places where black pixels are planned, the answer is very simple. I know from my experience that if you paint only some places, it will later turn out that you need to apply corrections, because not all masked pixels will have the right color depth. This happens to me in the past, so I have been painting the entire model in every shade of camo for a long time. For a moment I was wondering which version of camo to choose, but innate laziness and the possibility of using a set of ready-made masks won. Besides, my wife also said that the small pixels look much better than the big ones. So let's get to wrapping the model. The drawing with the location of individual elements visible here are very helpful. Maybe in some places you have to wait and think a little longer, but in general you can see everything you need here. I must say that the quality of the mask, their preparation, their cutout is very good and certainly saves time necessary for self-preparation. It would be even better if the manufacturer prepared the same set for the second camo version. As I said, I used a different shade for the green. This one is good enough and I repaint the entire model, leaving no blank space according to my explanation I gave couple seconds ago. The whole procedure of sticking mask is repeated. Oh, and it's worth mentioning that there are also a few extra stripes that can be used for additional elements or to complement the existing pixels. In my opinion, a very good idea. Good job, amusing. The main base color is another paint mix. This time the main color here is grey with a bit of 2 shades of brown. Now I'm also painting the whole model, remembering about all the elements that I skipped before. I'm mainly thinking about wheels and chassis here. And the moment of truth. I gently remove all the masks and check if the job is done. In some places, especially on the dark grey, some corrections need to be made, but the rest of the pixels are okay. Unfortunately, masks are, in my opinion, disposable. Of course you can try to use them again, but I think the glue is not as strong as for the first time. Because of this, the paint would probably flow under the tape without problems and ruin all the previous work. And one more note, it's worth removing the masks on individual panels, carefully checking whether all pieces are peeled off. It happens to me several times on previous models that a small pixel was missed and I found it in the next stages. In general, building the entire pixel camo is quite easy and contrary to appearances, if we have prepared masks like here, it's quite quick. Of course, it all depends on the number of colors. Usually it's a 3-color camo, but there are even 4 or 5 colors. Then there is much more work. And of course when we have to prepare masks ourselves. This greatly extends the working time. Therefore, once again I emphasize that the great advantage of this set is the package of masks prepared by the producer. As I mentioned, a few minor touch-ups with the brush were necessary. Black paint was used for several elements. Little things, however, needed painting. Oh, one thing, Nutter station was supposed to be covered with decals. However, when I looked at this element, I decided that I would put it aside and paint the whole thing black. I'd love to see someone do it with this sticker from the set and make it look good. I have some doubts as to whether this solution is okay. It seems to me that this is the weakest point of the model, but I could be wrong. With the airbrush loaded with paint, I also painted the exhaust and the area around it, making a bit of dirt, which will later be highlighted with pigment anyway. As I mentioned earlier in the pictures of the vehicles from the exhibitions, the wheels are painted entirely in camo. I will do it traditionally, but some will be left untouched around the edges and others will be painted normally. A bit of variety will be useful even though the model is motley. I removed the masking tape from the periscopes and I have some cool looking glasses with a dark background. Red transparent paint, the same like silverware used for optics. Like the Leopard 2, the red bolts on the wheels will be a nice detail as long as they are visible after weathering. Of course, also silver abrasions on the drive wheels and screws are also points brightening the dust of the field. One quick note, the drive wheels for the Leopard shouldn't be silver all over the teeth. I saw the vehicle up close and the tips of the teeth were camo color with no paint worn off. I don't know if it's always the case, but it's worth remembering. It's a pity that I didn't know it earlier because I would paint the wheels in my Leopard 2 A6 like that. I also painted the towing cables with silver paint as a base color for later weathering. Still using silver paint, I painted over the heads of the screws. This trick is useful for adding extra colors and spicing up the overall look of the model. You can also add some silver after weathering using a pencil. I used gunmetal to paint the trucks. I know that now many may say that this color is completely unsuitable, but in my opinion it's quite opposite. After painting the rubber parts and adding weathering like dirt and dust, they will look natural and probably no one will question the base color then. I didn't come up with it myself. Photos of the real vehicles are the best reference. Just search for a while on Google. As you can see, I don't play with the color application. With the end result in mind, it doesn't matter if the paint will lie perfectly or there will be some imperfections somewhere. I have already mentioned the set of decals and here it is in its entirety. I assembled it from various sets I had in my collection. There are stickers of Leopards, Tiger and other vehicles of the Bundeswehr. First I covered the places under the decals with VMS gloss varnish. In addition I sprayed a thin layer on the rest of the model. To empt the decals I used the liquid from VMS, which is designed to perfectly blend the stickers into the surface. All the decals add more life to the model, that's for sure. Now it looks more like a vehicle in service than a vehicle on display. First, a bit of glossy varnish to level the surface of decals and underwash. I chose the AK Interactive product to use, which I diluted and applied to the model. I immediately tried to control its amount by wiping off the excess and drying the fragments I was working on at the moment. It wasn't very complicated, but it takes some time. It was at this moment that I became convinced that worn winter camo would be a good solution to improve the appearance. I decided to prepare irregular patches with heavily damaged paint. That's why I covered the critical elements of the model with masking tape. I don't do it in any fancy way, but just so as not to paint over them. I used regular painter's tape with a weak adhesive and additional Tamiya tape. Heavily chipping fluid will be just right for this task. I added a bit of Dectan to the white paint to suppress the shade and applied this mixture to the model. For this I used examples of Leopard painting found on the internet, but I used them more as an inspiration than an exact representation of the arrangement of the spots. As you can see, painting was completely without pressure, just white camo spots with different intensity of color, as if they were painted in field conditions. The masking tape passed its test, and after removing it I was able to start destroying the freshly applied white paint. By soaking one fragment with water I activated the chipping fluid and worked using tweezers and a brush. The results were very good, exactly as I expected. After preparing all the surfaces I prepared the diluted wash again and applied it on the white camo. As you can see, it was necessary to improve the appearance and recreate the appearance of the details of the model. Winter streaking grime is a bit of forgotten product for me, but now it will be perfect for adding extra effects to vertical panels. Its application is not difficult, but you have to remember that sometimes it's necessary to use it more than once in the same place. The most important thing is not to overdo it with its amount, but on the other hand, check after drying whether stains will be visible. I usually focus on selected places and don't cover all surfaces with this effect. I think that subtle lines on the surfaces look best, but also in the recesses connecting the panels. It's time to take care of the chassis, which is a place where many modelers don't look, thinking that it's invisible place in the model. I think completely different and always try to do proper weathering there. You never know if a model won't be on public display and some judge wants to grab it with his hand to see if there is anything worth paying attention to. I am not saying this without a reason, because recently I've seen interesting photos from a competition in the USA where a judge without gloves was lifting the model up, shining a flashlight from his mobile. I don't know how I would react in this situation, but it's unacceptable. I think many of you will agree with me. Okay, to build the dried and moist matte I used VMS Pigment Jockey products. As you can see, the application is, how to say, quite fast, and the effects are very good and look realistic. I help myself with the accelerator, which definitely speeds up the working time. I prepared the tracks in the same way. I wanted to build a dried matte on the wheels with pigments by fixing them with alkyd binders. Thanks to this I got a natural looking and irregular matte, and additionally the pigment in places where it was applied in a small amount created a delicate wash. For me the effect is superb. What is the great advantage of this product is the ability to add pigment if we find that there isn't enough of it without having to reapply it. In the same way I applied pigment to the bottom of the hull, focusing primarily on the wheel area. Of course, I haven't forgotten about the sides of the hull, even though they will be almost invisible. On the bottom of the hull it's worth using various tools to spread the pigments. It's worth remembering that it's a very dirty place, but it's also exposed to all obstacles that the vehicle encounters on its way. That's why it's worth making large patches of dried matte here, applying more of it in the nooks and crannies, but also outline the worn lines, simulating traces of branches over which the tank passes while driving. The dark shade of pigment jockey is used to make wet matte on the hull near the wheels, but also on the wheels themselves. I decided to use much less than dry matte so that the contrast would be visible. Putting tracks on wheels is always a bit more fun than you might think, especially if we have moving pieces. In this case they were not perfect and their behavior resulted in some obscene words on my part, but after applying and finally fixing them on the wheels I was able to work on the wet matte again. As you can see, I've already done one side before and now I'm remixing VMS products. Dark Earth, alkyd binders in wet finish and universal weathering carrier. And I applied this mixture to the hull and wheels using various techniques. In this way I use the previous foundation of dark matte and dry matte placed at the very beginning. I have always liked such stains and in my opinion they certainly diversify the surface. I try to keep the balance so as not to lose the previously prepared layers. Even heavily diluted products can do the job. Here I created faint spots. The producer doesn't mention to use the pigment jockey for airbrush on the packing, but why not to try it? Okay, hold my beer and watch this. And it's possible and gives a great effect. You can even leave it like this without using pigments, but you know perfectly well that I like to add them to my model, so it will be the same here. Maybe not on the sides of the hull, but in the area of the turret ring and on the rear part of the hull for sure. Also at the bottom of the turret. I used a bit of oils to paint the dirt. It was a bit hard to get a satisfactory effect in some places because of the camo color, but in the end the job was done in the most important places. Notice how I distribute the paint using thinner. Now it's time for the pigment. I apply it mainly in the places I mentioned earlier, which are around the turret ring and on the back plate. A few drops of universal weathering carrier are enough to fix, which sticks the pigment to the surface very well. Of course, in the end the accelerator did the last job. After imposing the turrets, almost all the work done is covered, but it doesn't change the fact that it's necessary. Especially because large amount of dust collect in these places because they aren't exposed to constant abrasion during the use of the vehicle. Oh, one note. Such a wide brush is very useful for evenly distributing the pigment if you want to create a layer of dust. Certainly not matte. Okay, now it's time for some fuel stains and spill marks. For this I usually use an oil paint from 502 Uptilon called engine grease. I dilute it in various proportions and apply it to the model. You can also make vertical streaks with it as before with winter streaking grime, but they will be much more pronounced. In addition, some small spots will also do well on our model, just use the speckling technique, but it's worth checking beforehand how big the spots will be on a piece of paper. And of course oil leaks on the wheels. I have no doubts that they will enrich their appearance even despite the previously applied dry and wet matte. The paint will penetrate the pigment, creating an interesting effect. Small splashes of matte I prepared from a mixture of pigment jockey and pigment. I applied this paste to the lower surfaces of the side covers along the entire length of the model as well as at the front and rear of the vehicle. I did the same with dark earth, and additionally on the edge I applied irregular patches imitating larger amounts of wet matte. I improved the effect of salt around the exhaust. It was enough to wrap in a little black pigment, although in total it's a very dark grey. I ran a hobby knife along the sides of the model to make traces of abrasions from branches and bushes. I always say to do it with special care because it's easy to damage the paint. I mean, it's about doing damage to the paint, but you have to feel the moment when it's an imitation and when it's actually damaging of our work. The barrel of the machine gun was wiped with a soft pencil and I made an imitation of salt with pigment. Might be a bit of exaggeration, but it looks nice. As an introduction to the additional masking, I had to add U-shaped handles. The easiest way is to make them of wire, but if they are to fulfill their role, it's the best if they sit firmly in plastic. That's why I drilled holes for the wire with 0.3mm bit, which I glued with a bit of black CA glue from VMS. I used 3 drill bits for about 60 holes, so now I need to make order for new ones. All masking needs 3 elements. The first is a flexible modeling line, the second is paper tissue and the third is a camouflage net from AK Interactive. These 3 elements will build the appropriate final appearance of the model. First I'm going to prepare the tarp. I soak a cut piece of paper with paint, PVA glue and water. After dyeing the material I dry it with an accelerator so it doesn't stain my fingers, but it's still flexible. Let the work go on, and I would like to mention my wonderful patrons who support me in what I do. Massive thanks, guys! Please don't forget that you can be one of them. It's very easy because now there is a chance to enter this superb group without pay a penny for 7 days free trial. This way you can check whether you like what I publish for my patrons or not. From technical side you need to join for free by filling all gaps patron wants, and then you can surf on my page with no limits, watch and download all superb high resolution pictures, watch progress shots, check stories with unpublished in other media's models, read the articles and enjoy other benefits, but about the 7th day you need to decide if you stay with me or go back home. Please remember that your support is highly appreciated and helps me do what I do here at coldemonspl and what I love the most. Thanks to this I will try to give you some interesting content to keep you informed and entertained. The second color is German Field Grey, which after dilution I will use to color part of the tarp. Note that I didn't cover the entire piece of fabric with it. Dark grey will be used to make even darker places, but there will be definitely less of them. Of course the paint is also diluted and the material is dried with an accelerator. Finally a drop of green-brown to make small dots or dirt. In this way I have a large piece of material ready to be cut or torn into smaller elements. The largest fragment will be prepared at the beginning and placed on the front of the vehicle. The others will be much smaller. After cutting it to approximate size, I start to tear it so that its edges are rugged. Laying is very simple because we just need tap water to soften the paper and activate the glue that it's soaked with. Laying on the model depends on our imagination. Giving shapes and the final appearance depends on the construction of the vehicle and the effect we want to achieve. The great advantage of this solution is that the individual elements can be merged with each other, and after drying, the connection will be almost invisible. Note that the multicolored tarp adds an interesting look even after placing it on the model and tearing it into smaller pieces. Leaving the tarp to dry, of course the accelerator did its job, I started preparing the camouflage net. First I kneaded it properly so that it wasn't straight as after ironing, and then I strongly stretched the patterns cut out in it. I only need a small piece for the model and it will be enough. And of course the mesh can be painted in any color. I played mine a bit on ivory, but you can't see it practically at all, so I skipped showing this step. Here I also prepare a fragment for a specific place on the model and form it using PVA glue. In some places you need thin glue, and in some places where the mesh has a problem with lying on the model in the right shape, you need to support yourself with a bit of thick glue. And here, as in the case of tarp, we arrange the selected fragment so that it's realistic and looks nice on the model at the same time. Sometimes it takes a while, but trust me, it's worth the effort. And once again I will repeat, smaller pieces are better than larger ones. Even if in reality the crews cover half of the vehicle with one piece, it will 100% look bad on the model. When all the masking nets are in the place and the glue is dry enough, you can safely start tying the flexible line. And right now I'm using the previously made wire handles, which I prepared so carefully by breaking my drills. And here you will also have to think about how to braid the line to make it look good. Therefore gluing it should be left at the very end of this stage. It also takes some time due to some difficulty in taming the line. Painting is another matter. It's best to have a small piece of paper and tweezers for this. We just put the paper under the line and paint it. Tweezers can be used for the same, but then we will be painting a slightly stretched line, which may result in it slipping out of the tweezers grip. Risky but necessary in some places. For example, where the line lies on the camouflage net. If you would like to ask about the color, I saw a rope stretched on a military vehicle and it was an even lighter shade than what you see here. It certainly shouldn't be left unpainted. We are slowly approaching to the end. There are still little things to do. One of them is arranging a dozen or so atom leaves on the vehicle in places where they could stay a bit longer and the wind and speed of the vehicle didn't blow them away completely. I glued them with sand and ballast freeze from VMS. The bandages is the same paper I used for the tarp, but here it's cut into thin stripes. I will make an imitation of binding on the gun barrel from them. Of course, this is going to be a controlled mess. I fixed them with well diluted PVA glue, and in addition to the barrel I also threw a few stripes on the roof of the turret. introducing a little variety. If I have winter painting and elements of winter masking, then a little snow won't hurt anybody and it will certainly add an interesting look. I sprinkled snow from Aker Interactive on the PVA glue and left it to dry. What didn't stick, I just blew it off. Quick and simple solution. There is also some snow on the wheels. I glued it in the same way as on the turret. At the end I left myself to do a wash on the black elements, which are the nutter station and the antennas. I used diluted pigment jockey for this, exactly the one that is on other elements of the model. Mounting these parts is the last stage of work, and adding them to the model is like decorating a birthday cake. Great feeling. Oh, and I forgot about very light grey wash on the winter Camo net, just quick improvements for the very end of work. In the end it looks like this. It must be admitted that it's a piece of model and will certainly attract attention in the collection with its size but also shape. My goal was to build interesting camo and weathering so that the boxy look would be varied with different effects and colors. Additional camouflage was also intended to break the even lines of the vehicle, and it seems to me that I managed to complete this task. Project Tank is not my favorite type of vehicle, but building such a model has its advantages. You can create it in an unlimited way through your own solutions in every field while working on the model. Nobody can say that something is not true. Okay, my friends, thank you for taking a few minutes to check my work. If you like what I do, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click like and write a comment. That's all for today, see you next time, cheers!